Welcome to Anatomy and Physiology. We will go over some of the basics of Chapter 1 in this first Show Me presentation. Chapter 1 starts out by defining anatomy and physiology and then goes into some of the basics of the human body, finishing the chapter with presenting a whole new language of terminology for you for the further communication in both this course and in the real world when you finish this course if you are going into some sort of healthcare field. When you registered to take this course, what did you think when you heard the word anatomy? And what did you think when you heard the word physiology? Did you have some preconceived notion of what they might be? For our purpose, when we talk about anatomy, we're talking about the structure of something. We're talking about its shape, its texture, its size. When we look at physiology of something, we are studying its function. So the question that you should ask when looking at physiology is, what does this particular anatomical structure, what does it do? What is its function? How does it carry out its job? When you break down the word anatomy, anyone know what this word actually means? It actually means to cut up, which takes us back to the times when we didn't have digital means and people would learn about anatomical structures by having to physically cut into things, which you guys will do this semester with your dissections. So when we take a look at the word physiology, what does this word mean when you break it down? So ology, as some of you might know, means the study of, and the physio portion refers to the nature of something. So it's literally the study of the nature of something, which is typically going to be an anatomical structure that we're looking at. So when we mention the word gross anatomy, we're talking about anatomy on a macro scale, which means that you can see it with the naked eye. It's a large structure, as opposed to microscopic anatomy, which means that you have to use some sort of tool to be able to see the structure. It's a small structure. So you guys have probably all heard of microscopes. Two of the types of anatomy that the textbook mentions is cytology. Okay, cytology. Which, remember we defined what ology means. Cyto means cell. And also, it mentions histology. So when we look at histology, it is the study of tissues. So when we say histo, we're talking about tissue. Okay, next is developmental anatomy. Developmental anatomy takes a look at anatomical development throughout the lifetime. So as you may know, there are different anatomical structures with a fetus and with an infant and with a child going into adolescence and then through adulthood. Now, embryology takes into account the study of developments before birth. And that's a whole branch of healthcare and anatomy in its own. There's a concept called complementarity, which means that the structure of something gives rise to its function. So maybe the way something is shaped. Predicts function. So, for instance, the femur. Everyone know what the femur is. The femur is the largest bone in the body. It's found in the leg. If you take a look at the shape of the femur, the top of the femur that fits into the hip is round. It's called the head of the femur. It fits into the acetabulum of the pelvic bone. If it were not round, if it were, say, square-shaped, do you think that that would have some deciding factor on its function? Do you think that it would limit its function if it were square-shaped? So it's shaped round for a reason, and that's to give us very large range of motion for the hip joint. As we look through the physiology and also the anatomy in the body, you're going to see there's levels of organization. So you might see in your book the chemical level leading all the way down to the organism. These are very important to know each of these steps. So please take a look at these chemical level, cellular level, so on and so forth, and understand that we're going from smallest, okay, to largest as we move through this particular list. The next sections look at the requirements for life. There are necessary life functions that we must maintain, such as boundaries, such as movement, responsiveness, digestion, metabolism, and excretion. So look through this list because these are important, and these necessary life functions will depend on the organ systems, the 11 organ systems working together to maintain life. So when we look at the organ systems, you might already know most of these. So we have the integumentary system, which consists of the hair, the skin, the nails, the glands that are associated with those. We have the skeletal system, which is important for support and protection of our organs, but also for giving our muscles a place to attach to so that we have proper movement. Also, blood cells are formed in the bones, and mineral storage also does take place here. We have the muscular system, which is important for movement, maintaining posture, and keeping us warm. Most people don't think about the fact that our muscles are what keeps us warm and keeps our body temperature proper. The nervous system is in charge of communication in the body. The nervous system uses nervous tissue to respond to internal and external changes that come about throughout our lifetime. Also the endocrine system. This one works with the nervous system. It uses hormones in order to, and remember, hormones are chemical messengers which will communicate with certain body target organs and target cells that will be in charge of growth. So we have growth hormone, reproduction, sugar, you might have heard of insulin before, thyroid gland organs, hormones, pituitary hormones, pineal gland, which secretes a hormone called melatonin. So we'll talk about this in chapter 16. We have a whole chapter dedicated to the immune system. We have the cardiovascular system. This one's a very fun one for most people because they like studying the heart. Remember, this system also consists of the blood vessels around the body. We have the lymphatic system. The lymphatic system doesn't get very much love usually. No one really says, oh, my favorite system is the lymphatic system, but it's very important because it picks up fluid that's leaked from the body and returns it into circulation along with the blood. It is in charge of cleansing the body, so it's very high in macrophages and in cells that will dispose of cellular debris and also foreign antigens. It works along with the immune system. So the immune system is a system of cells and proteins that will help to defend us against bacteria, against viruses, parasites, and even our own body cells at times. We have the respiratory system, which is in charge of our breathing and the passage of oxygen into the body, and also getting rid of carbon dioxide, which is our waste. So gas exchange taking place in the lungs. Digestive system, which is a massive system, is in charge of our nutrients, so breaking down the food that we ingest into small enough pieces that we can absorb, and then transporting them around and using those pieces to build our body parts. Also, in charge of getting rid of things that we do not digest and eliminating these things. Also, for elimination, urinary system, this is for liquid waste, and it also is in charge of regulating water balance. So the kidneys are in charge of water balance, electrolyte balance, acid-base chemistry, keeping us in proper pH and whatnot. Then we have the reproductive systems. We have male and female reproductive systems, and obviously these two systems are different. The male reproductive system has organs that are in charge of providing half of the chromosomal material to create offspring, whereas the female will obviously have the other half. So the duct system and the gonads are both different for male and female. Also, remember that hormones play an important role for male and female as well. Okay, this brings us to survival needs. Survival needs are several factors that we need for survival, such as nutrients, such as oxygen, water, proper body temperature, and atmospheric pressure, P sub ATM. So these things are all important. We have to have these things to survive. So with nutrients, obviously, we're talking about glucose, sugar, amino acids, the things that we ingest, minerals, vitamins, so on and so forth. Oxygen, obviously, we need for cellular respiration to create our ATP. Remember, ATP is our energy source. Water, important to keep us hydrated. Proper body temperature. If our temperature goes too high or low, our organs can shut down. And atmospheric pressure. We have to have proper atmospheric pressure in order to properly get the right amount of oxygen. So if we were to go up too high or go down too low underwater, and you guys might know that people who do go underwater have to go into pressure chambers in order to make sure that they can breathe properly after going below the body or the water surface. Okay, homeostasis. So homeostasis is a very important word for not only the human body but for all of life. It is the maintenance of proper and stable conditions. So homeostasis, often said to be the wisdom of the body, keeps us in check. Okay, keeps us in check. A lot of times we don't even know that the body is making changes to keep us in a proper window for survival. So it's a dynamic state, meaning it's always changing. So it's always going up and down, okay? But it's keeping us within the range necessary for life. So that if we go above, okay, something's going to happen that's going to bring us back down, and consequently, if we were to go below something, a proper level, then we would hopefully be brought back up. Because if you live in this area up here or down here, these are where we start to have problems and breakdowns and have disease, and also staying up in those areas or down below, they can really be inconsistent with life. So homeostasis is very important, and the basis of all disease is based on the disturbance or the imbalance of homeostasis. And your textbook goes through each chapter, starting with chapter 5, and you're going to see in each chapter a section called homeostatic imbalances, and you're going to see them pop up all throughout the textbook and throughout PowerPoint slides if you're looking at them. And these homeostatic imbalances are important because this is going to be the things that go wrong, so disease processes that take place in certain body systems. So if you say, like for the skin, can anyone think of some disease processes for the skin? Okay, the big one that I'm thinking of, since we live in Florida, is obviously skin cancer. Okay, what about, say, for the bones? Can anyone think of any imbalances they've heard of with bone? I'm thinking of one called osteoporosis. Osteoporosis. Okay, what about for the heart? Can you think of any imbalances you've heard of for the heart? So maybe heart attack or myocardial infarction, maybe congestive heart failure, okay, hypertension. So you're going to see these types of words throughout not only this course but also AP2 as well. As we go through each of the systems, you will also learn about the problems that can arise within these systems. We have what are called feedback loops. We have negative feedback loops and we have positive feedback loops. These feedback loops are important, okay, because they communicate with the brain and with the control centers what's going on in the body. They use receptors and they use what are called effectors. So when you look at the step-by-step, you have a receptor that communicates with the control center, which then will make a decision and cause some sort of change through what's called an effector. So this is kind of the way that this all flows. When we see negative feedback loops turn off the stimulus. So say you go out into the sun in the middle of August, we live in Florida, and you stay out there for an hour. What's going to happen to your body? Okay, first of all, what is the stimulus that you are receiving? What is the external stimulus? Okay, it's the sun, it's heat. And what is that heat going to attempt to do to your body? It's going to attempt to raise your body temperature. So in order to combat the heat, okay, so the receptor receives the signal, which is heat. Your brain is going to communicate with your skin to maybe sweat. And that's going to shut off that initial rise in temperature, bringing your body temperature back down. Okay, this is called a negative feedback loop. Now, the positive feedback loop does not occur as often in the body. There's only a couple examples of it in the human body, but it enhances the stimulus. It enhances the stimulus. So one example of this is childbirth. Okay, childbirth. So in the case of childbirth, the receptor is the uterus, and it's going to receive the signal, or receive the signal that the child is ready to be born. It's going to communicate with the control center, which is the brain, to create more hormone for contractions. So it's going to communicate with via a hormone called oxytocin that's going to tell the cervix to dilate. When the cervix dilates, then it communicates back with the uterus that there is dilation. The uterus will then tell the brain about this, and then there will be more oxytocin release, which will then cause more dilation of the cervix. And so we see this loop that's happening, but each time it's getting bigger and bigger, okay, until the ultimate goal is achieved. And what is the ultimate goal in this case? Okay, childbirth. So those mothers that have had children who are watching this, you know that this was a building process. It was a process that was getting stronger and stronger, and I'm sure you could not wait to get that child out towards the end. So kind of switching gears now, we're going to talk about anatomical terms quickly. So anatomical position is something that you need to be aware of, and you need to be able to define it. There will be a test question most likely about anatomical position. Okay, anatomical position is defined as the body erect, so standing up, feet slightly apart, palms facing anterior, and the thumbs facing lateral. So why do we have anatomical position? What's the big deal? It is for proper communication, okay, and it gives us a standard. So that if I were to communicate over the phone with someone and I were to say certain things, so I were to say that an incision was made 1 inch distal to the antecubital region on the anterior surface of the forearm, then there would be no ambiguity about what that meant. So it's for proper communication, and it creates a standard so that there is no confusion in speaking, writing, or reading about certain anatomical parts. So we use directional terms to refer to body parts in relation to each other. So the directional terms are listed in table 1.1 in your textbook. So please look at this table, and you will see that superior, inferior, anterior, and posterior are the first ones listed, and it gives you an example of each one. These are all very important, and from here on forward, when I refer to moving up or down or forwards or backwards, you're going to hear me use these terms. Also note there are alternate terms for anterior and posterior, ventral/dorsal, which are very important. One little thing that I always used to remember was dorsal, if you're trying to remember which way is which. I always remembered that Flipper, you guys know who Flipper is? Okay, he was a TV show, Dolphin. He has a dorsal fin. And where's the dorsal fin located? On his back. So just a silly little way to remember what the term dorsal means. Okay, the next terms you see, lateral and medial, are important for moving sideways across body parts. And then we come to proximal and distal. Okay, proximal and distal are only used when we're talking about the limbs, so the arms and the legs. So, for instance, the hand is proximal to the fingers because it's closer to the source, whereas we'll say the wrist is distal from the elbow because it's farther away from the source in this case being the shoulder where it originates. If we're going to talk about maybe the knee, so let's see, if we were going to relate the knee is blank to the ankle, what would you think? Is it proximal, closer to the source than the ankle, or is the knee farther away from the source than the ankle? So the correct answer here would be proximal. Knee is proximal to the ankle. So you need to be able to take all of these terms and be able to relate body parts with them. And speaking of body parts, you have on figure 1.7a in your text, you have this particular image which details the regions of the body and what their proper anatomical term or medical term is referred to as. So for instance, we're not just going to call this up here the head anymore. Okay, there are specific regions that are important for the head and the face. So we see cephalic refers to head region. Okay, frontal, orbital, nasal, oral, and mental are all regions referring to the forehead, the eye, the nose, the mouth, and the chin. These are all very important. They're all very close together, so it's important to note these terms. All of these terms are very important to know. Make sure that you take a good look at this list and really focus on the ones that you might have never heard of. So there are some funny ones in here, such as antecubital, antebrachial. Most people have heard of carpal because of carpal tunnel syndrome. Palmar refers to the palm. Pollex is an important one. Pollex refers to the thumb. Okay, digital, coxal for hip. Okay, patellar. Crural is the front. So this is like the shin. And I bring this up because the back of the leg is going to be called something very close to this. Okay, axillary, mammillary, inguinal, pubic. So most people have heard of some of these at least. Now if we take a look at the back side, like I said, the sural is going to be very close to the word crural. Oops, I spelled it wrong. So make sure you don't get these two confused. Okay, acromial olecranon. So these are very strange words. Otic refers to ear. Most people, or not most people, but a lot of people might have heard of the term otoscope. Okay, occipital for the back of the head. Scapular. Lumbar refers to the low back. Remember, thoracic is the middle back. Cervical is the neck. Okay, where else do you find cervical in the body? Ladies, have you heard of cervical in your own bodies before? Remember, cervical can also refer to the cervix. Okay, gluteal, sacral, perineal, plantar, calcaneal. So you see here regions of the body. Now on your first exam, these two pictures will be on your exam. However, it will be just a blank picture. Okay, there will be no words. And there will be maybe one arrow coming off and it'll say number 1. And it'll have 5 choices for you. And you will have to choose which one that is. So what would that be? This is going to be femoral. Okay, so when we get closer to exam time, we'll talk more about what to expect. Body planes are listed. I'm not going to go through body planes with you all. You need to go through and look at these on your own. There's different types of body planes where you can see different parts. Also, the body cavities. Go through your text or through the PowerPoints and look at the body cavities. Okay, these two things will both be on your exam. So make sure you are familiar with these two. What I will go over with you lastly for this presentation will be the regions of the abdomen. So we're looking at someone, this is an anterior, so we're looking at their front side. So it's important to note which side is right and left when looking at someone from the front. So this over here is not technical difficulties. This over here is not their right side. This is that person's left side. This is the right side. Therefore, we have what's called the quadrant system to name the abdomen. This one's very popularly used in the healthcare field and by medical personnel. So we're just going to abbreviate. Okay, this is the left upper quadrant. This is the left lower quadrant. This is the right upper quadrant. And this is the right lower quadrant. So this one's pretty easy, and it's okay to abbreviate these in practice. Most of the time these things are already abbreviated, and it's important to note. Say you have a patient who comes in with right lower quadrant pain, debilitating pain, nausea, they're curled up in a ball. Maybe it's their appendix, maybe they have appendicitis. So it's important eventually for you all to know which particular organs lie in these regions. Now, we also have a more complicated way to name things. Blow this up a little bit for us, and I'm going to draw a tic-tac-toe board. So in your text, you'll see that this next picture is slightly different. Okay, this middle region is called the umbilical region because of the umbilicus that lies right in the middle. Okay, the umbilical region. If we move to the sides of the umbilical region, we have the right lumbar region, and we have the left lumbar region, which if you were to reach around, this would be on each side where the low back is actually located. So that lumbar region kind of comes around the side of the body and towards the front. Okay, if we move higher superiorly from the umbilical region, we have what's called the epigastric region. Okay, epigastric region. So the term epigastric, epi means on top of, and gastric means, anyone know? Stomach. So we see that the stomach is located in this general vicinity. So that region is named because it mostly lies right on top of the stomach. Okay? The next region will be the right and left hypochondriac regions. So left hypochondriac. This is not named after your grandmother who thinks that she's sick all the time. I'll explain what this means in a second here. So these two regions are the very top on each side. And so the word hypo, or the prefix hypo, as you may remember, means below. And the root word chondro refers to these structures right here. Now these, you might think these are ribs, but this is actually cartilage. Okay, cartilage. So chondro means cartilage. Okay, cartilage. So hypochondriac refers to these two regions. Now, I brought up the term hypochondriac, meaning when you think of someone who feels like they're always ill. And the reason for this is way back in Greek times, it was thought that all disease came from the gut, came from this region. So this is why people are called hypochondriacs, because it was originally thought to come from those particular regions. Okay, we lack two here, so the last two are the left inguinal. You can also call this iliac. So inguinal is the part where the leg meets the trunk. Iliac refers to the bone found there, which is part of your pelvis, the ilium. So we have the left and right regions. And it does not matter to me which one you call these. And on a test, though, you do need to remember that they do mean the same thing. And the last section is the hypogastric. Okay, hypogastric. So hypogastric, obviously, since we've defined the prefix hypo and gastric, you should realize that that means below the stomach. Okay, thank you for watching our first Show Me. There will be more to come throughout the semester. If you have any questions, feel free to use the discussion posting for questions for the professor, or send me an email.